There was a bit of a bromance going on there, because we were in France and they look like they get on very well.
Yeah, they really do. And Macron is very tactile, as we know, and so is the King. I mean, you would never have seen that happening with the late Queen, but they clearly get on very well.
How do you think that went down? There was lots of kissing on hands. I lost count the amount of times Macron had his hand on William's elbow, or he had his hand on the King's back. You point out that wouldn't happen with the late Queen.
No.
How welcome do you think this is for the royal family to have this behaviour?
We do always watch the body language in these scenarios, and I've got to say, it was warm. It was just very, very warm, and I think that it does appear that you've used the word bromance, but it does appear there's a very friendly relationship here, and I think they do have, the King and the President have a lot of shared interests, and the King touched on that in his speech about the climate issues. But also, I love that he made some jokes throughout that speech. I just thought it was very warm, and it was actually quite lighthearted for the King. And as you say, he's going between French and English, and he made the joke about the English sparkling wine and how that wouldn't be well received in France, a couple of generations ago. Yeah, it just seemed like a really wonderful display again of the soft power, but also of the relationship between these two men who are clearly here on good terms and seemed quite excited to be hanging out, to be honest.
There's an Australian link here, because 30 years ago there was outrage, or confected outrage, when Paul Keating, the then Prime Minister, placed his hand on the back of Elizabeth II, guiding her somewhere, and there was a big row about that. But now, that nobody would bat an eyelid at any of that. But I love Macron's line in his speech at Parliament, where he said, a very charming speech, and he said, we love monarchy, especially when it's not in our country.
I loved that too. They were both quite funny speeches in that way. Again, it had the elements. There's a lot of serious issues being discussed, exactly as you said, with the global crises at the moment, and they're discussing their migration. But yeah, to have those lighter moments in there, I just found it an incredibly charming display from both of them.
There was a mix, wasn't there, between seriousness and jokes, and it was timed quite well. Simon, do you think, you've listened to a lot of speeches from Queen Elizabeth II, and state visits by the King. He's more political in many ways, or do you think he's more political in many ways, or he touches on more political issues? He's more confident to use words like irregular migration, whereas the late Queen may not have got into those words?
Yeah, I mean, I think the late Queen did occasionally touch on those topics, but it was obviously all of these speeches are written and then approved by the ministers, the government ministers, so there are various drafts going on. He is, yes, to answer your question, he is edging more towards that, but he knows there is a line, there is a wall there that he can't go over. Whereas when he was Prince of Wales, in terms of the environment or architecture or opportunities for young people, I mean, actually, he's still very hot on that, but he can't be quite as actively speaking to ministers as he was back then. But he clearly wants to do it his own way, and he wants, you can't not talk about or allude to the small boats situation when you have the President of France there in Windsor.
There were some real diplomatic hoops being jumped through, if I'm going to strangle an analogy there. But it does... In the future, we've got Donald Trump coming, and that's going to be, this times 10. It felt like a bit of a dummy run, because it's going to be in Windsor. We don't know if carriages will be there when Trump's there. It might not, for security reasons, we might not. But do you think Charles, the King, is maybe having sleepless nights, worried about his speech to Trump, what he can leave in, what he can't, what he must leave out? Because he's not going to be talking about climate change to Donald Trump. This is almost like a practice run for when he sits down at the state banquet with Trump.
I'm sure the King is intensely relaxed about the speech. I'm sure there'll be a couple of pointed references to things that he wants to speak about there. Maybe migration will be in there, and an allusion to walls or whatever. I don't think he really cares that much about that. It'll be diplomatically couched, and he'll do it his way.
It'll be a similar bromance?
No.
No.
I think it's a good base, as you just mentioned. But the King is also he's really settled into this role as sort of I think is a global peacemaker at the moment. But he's been able to balance those very sensitive issues among we saw it in Canada earlier this year. With the issues with the US and Canada, and I think he will be relaxed about it going in, only because already it's been well established that he and the US president, They have a good relationship. Mr. Trump really likes the royals and likes the king, and so it's not like they're starting off at a difficult base. I think that there will be, if they put on a great show, if they have all the pomp and ceremony and the pageantry we've seen, I think that will be really well received by the president, and I think that's really all that they'll be looking to do, is just put on a really good show and show him that he's a very special and honoured guest. I think that's going to be the key element.
Yeah, that's the key thing, is that Donald Trump is a monarchist because his mum, a Scot, was an ardent monarchist. So, and the King and Trump definitely get on. That having two state visits in the space of a few weeks is strange. Definitely, Downing Street seems to have been pushing for this more than usual. So there's some controversy behind the scenes about how it's all been scheduled. But I think the King and Donald Trump will definitely get on. It may not be quite as tactile as what we've just seen.
There was one part just right at the end after Macron's speech. He was talking about, long live Great Britain and the UK, long live France, and long live this entente amicale, which is like upgrading entente cordiale to, a relationship of friendship. And right at the end, when he finished it, Charles actually clenched his fists, like almost in partial celebration.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've never seen that kind of emotion from him. But it's also stressful as well, these trips. And we did, when we first saw the King, when he first emerged, we did have a bloodshot eye. How worried are we about that, Bronte?
No, I've actually done this before, although mine was because I have these enormous nails. But I've accidentally scratched my eye in my sleep before, and I had exactly the same thing. And it looks, sorry to the King, it does look horrific, but actually, they clear up in a couple of days. It's not a big deal.
They said it was a burst blood vessel the night before, but not connected to his treatment.
Yeah, so these things can happen. I think they're fairly common. They're quite painless too. It just looks quite painful. It's a dramatic look, but of course he had to be there yesterday. He's not going to pull out of that. But yeah, the pictures, it was just unfortunate. I felt quite bad for him because the pictures are a little bit alarming when you first glance at it.
You were alarmed by seeing the King looking? He didn't look great. His eye didn't look great.
No, it looks horrible. But as you say, we're assured that it's nothing to do with his ongoing treatment for cancer, and it was just one of those things. I think the day one of the state visit obviously is the big royal day. I think it went really well. The weather helped. It helps when the sun is shining. And just going back to Trump, maybe they will have a carriage procession. I mean, it's a shorter route than would be in London for Buckingham Palace, but obviously that really will be up to the American Secret Service whether they want him in an open carriage like that.
On a slightly lighter note, I have to ask you, I just saw the pictures of the table that the state banquet where it was held, and I was told, I read that it was the biggest, is it the longest table in England? Did you see it up close?
Yeah, we had a little walk around before the guests came in. It's 50 metres long, it's mahogany, took a week to lay out all the candles. It was 137 candles.
How did it look?
It looks brilliant. It actually looked better than Buckingham Palace. Don't tell Buckingham Palace that, but it looked better than the state dinners that you see in Buckingham Palace. 160 people, say, took a week to lay out.